Under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, expressing dissent can lead to trouble, but even saying, "I have nothing to say," is not acceptable. On February 26, famous X-user Teacher Lee is not your teacher exposed an incident from February 23 in Zhengzhou, China. A woman raised a sign saying, "I have nothing to say," walking silently through the streets and malls of the city center, with an assistant filming and live streaming the entire event. However, the live stream was swiftly shut down, with the platform saying that the broadcast violated their rules. Subsequently, the channel was unexpectedly shut down for 12 hours, leaving many bewildered. In response, netizens left comments expressing their opinions. "Don't think we don't know what you want to say. Although you have nothing to say, they know what you want to say. Salute to you. Indeed, if you say anything, it's either jail or a mental hospital. In an era that only allows praise, having nothing to say is also a crime. If you have nothing to say, it means you're dissatisfied with the regime. Otherwise, you should strive to praise. That's the logic of the communist world. In the future, not only white paper, black paper, red paper, blue paper. The CCP is afraid of you not cooperating and getting a response. For example, lying flat, or like before, not getting tested or scanning health codes. A copycat of the blank paper movement, of course, the Communist Party can see through it. Blank paper revolution 2.0. Some netizens were left dumbfounded, exclaiming, "Suffocating. Isn't this considered anti-communist? You can't say anything, but you can't say nothing. How fragile is the CCP's heart? How many bad things have they done? Looks like someone else's glass heart is broken again. Chinese people don't have the freedom to speak, now they don't even have the right not to speak." Some commented, "Now they won't let us hold signs, next they won't let us raise our hands, and eventually we won't even be able to lift our heads." This inevitably brings to mind a joke from the former Soviet Union. There was a person distributing blank papers in Moscow's Red Square and was arrested by the KGB. The KGB asked him, "Don't you know that distributing leaflets is illegal?" The person replied, "But I distributed blank papers." The KGB said, "Don't think that just because there's nothing written on it, I don't know what you want to say." This former Soviet joke has become the reality in China. Since the CCP came into absolute power, the freedom of speech written into the Constitution has never been fulfilled. The so-called liberation of thought is only occasional, relative, and done with bravado. Suppressing dissent is the norm. After the founding of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong's personal prestige reached its peak, and China soon entered a long period of one-man rule until his death. After the end of the Cultural Revolution, the 1980s could be considered a brief period of relatively relaxed ideological and speech control, which many people remember with nostalgia. The Tiananmen Square protests in 1989 marked the end of this period. The CCP killed the seeds of progressive thought among the Chinese people. During Jiang Zemin's leadership in the late 1990s and early 2000s, significant measures were put in place that still shape China today. In 2000, the Ministry of Public Security initiated the Golden Shield Project, aiming to build a vast system for censorship and surveillance. This project was designed to control online content, track individuals, and access personal records instantly. Later, during Hu Jintao's leadership in the early 2000s, media and public opinion were further restricted. As Xi Jinping took power, China entered the era of mobile internet and social media. This posed new challenges for the CCP. While blocking information and speech became more difficult, their control over public opinion reached unprecedented levels. Xi Jinping's ambitions were often compared to those of Mao, and his leadership has intensified the CCP's efforts to shape and manage public discourse. After years of escalating internet censorship and surveillance by the CCP, it has reached an unprecedented level of severity. Many bloggers and social media users have been arrested and sentenced by the authorities for posting critical comments online or sharing information related to human rights. Even a blank sheet of paper with nothing written on it will be banned by the CCP. In the autumn and winter of 2022, anti-censorship demonstrations broke out in many parts of China. At that time, China was under strict control. On November 24th, a fire broke out in a residential area in Urumqi. It was suspected that rescue was delayed due to the lockdown, which pushed the dissatisfaction to a high point. On November 26, students from Nanjing University raised blank papers on campus to mourn the victims and protest against the pandemic control policies. At that time, thousands of people took to the streets of Shanghai, Beijing, Wuhan, and other cities in China to protest against the CCP government's zero-COVID policy, and some even condemned the CCP's authoritarian rule. Protesters held up blank papers symbolizing silent protests. Protesters also shouted slogans such as "End Zero COVID," "We Want Human Rights," and "Overthrow the Communist Party." Inspired by this, young people overseas said,
I thought I would never hear this slogan in my life, but I didn't expect that this slogan was actually shouted from the mouths of the protesters in mainland China. I think it is very exciting. This shows that we Chinese people pursue freedom. There is much to be done for democratic and progressive movements.
The wave of protests subsequently spread to at least 21 provinces in China, including 39 cities and over 100 universities. This round of protests was quickly dubbed the Blank Paper Movement, although the protests only lasted for a few days within China. They were considered by the outside world to be the largest citizen action since the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Following this, CCP authorities engaged in large-scale harassment or detention of students, journalists, and others participating in the protests, many of whom were women. According to statistics from the citizen-run Rights Protection Network, at least over 100 people were arrested during the Blank Paper Movement, with at least 32 of them having confirmed identities. Although some individuals have been released, others were still awaiting trial, while many young protesters remain missing or detained. Those fortunate enough to be released have fled China, bringing the spark of the Blank Paper Movement overseas and joining like-minded individuals in continuing related activities abroad. Supportive protests have emerged overseas, and some outspoken organizations have been established, such as China Deviants. In addition to organizing demonstrations and protests, these organizations focus on grassroots citizen education, hosting numerous screenings and workshops discussing democracy, freedom, and civil rights, contributing to the exposure of the CCP's suppression and promoting democratic enlightenment. Moreover, two organizations initiated by students and focusing on Chinese feminism have emerged in London, gradually forming a Chinese dissident network in the UK. Since the generation of the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, a new generation of Chinese dissident organizations has risen. The wave of anti-communist sentiment, both domestically and internationally, is causing unease among the CCP ruling class. Aware of the myriad of threats to their regime, the CCP tightens its grip on speech even further. Take the example of WeChat, China's most popular social platform, which has undergone repeated waves of account purges. The most recent instance occurred on January 19th of this year, when Beijing authorities ordered a key crackdown on the internet in 2024. Numerous WeChat accounts were shut down, with the term account suspension searched nearly 30 million times within a day, marking a 16.5-fold increase from the previous day. WeChat users whose accounts were suspended flooded Tencent's customer service with appeals, many finding their accounts permanently banned. Some claimed they had done nothing wrong and were perplexed by the sudden suspension. Those who appealed and promised to behave had their bans downgraded to temporary suspensions. However, others, although not banned, found various features restricted. Netizens also commented that the recent crackdown wasn't limited to WeChat. TikTok's Chinese version, Douyin, was also heavily hit, along with news aggregator Toutiao. On September 1st last year, searches for account suspension on WeChat reached nearly 170 million. Historical data reveals that there were multiple instances last year where daily searches for account suspension exceeded 30 million. The Chinese Ministry of Public Security has designated 2024 as a year for special action against rumors on the internet. Additionally, the CCP Cyberspace Administration is soliciting opinions on enhancing its clear internet actions in 2024. It's foreseeable that the CCP's internet censorship this year will become even more frantic. The CCP's suppression of speech extends beyond its borders. Chinese artist Li Ying, who lived in Milan in 2022, was prevented from seeing his parents in China for 3 years due to COVID policies. Later, Li Ying did something he never expected to be so important. He renamed his X account Teacher Li is Not Your Teacher. The account became a platform where people from mainland China sent him photos, videos, and accounts that would be subject to censorship on Chinese internet, sometimes at a rate of more than 10 per second. Teacher Li is not your teacher thus became the largest influencer in the Chinese-speaking community and a thorn in the side of the CCP authorities. On February 25th this year, Teacher Li is not your teacher issued an urgent notice on X claiming that the Ministry of Public Security is investigating all 1.6 million of his followers and commenters. For safety reasons, he advised all fearful fans to consider unfollowing him. This message triggered a chain reaction. Not only did the account lose 200,000 followers in just 4 or 5 days, but many other prominent anti-communist influencers outside China also experienced mass unfollows or significant drops in traffic. On February 29th, the international human rights organization Freedom House released its Freedom in the World 2024 report, which evaluates the civil and political rights and freedoms of 210 countries and regions worldwide. According to the report, out of a possible score of 100, China scored 9 points, once again categorizing it as not free. Yana Gorokovskaya, the research director at Freedom House, said that the CCP stands out as a significant perpetrator of human rights violations. She highlighted instances such as in Tibet, where just last year, a staggering 1 million children were forcibly separated from their families and enrolled in government-controlled boarding schools, where they were obligated to assimilate into Mandarin language and Chinese cultural norms. Gorovskaya also pointed out the CCP's crackdown in Hong Kong, where journalists, advocates for democracy, and dissenters face arrest. She noted the passing of amendments by the pro-Beijing Legislative Council that effectively eliminated the majority of directly elected seats, thereby closing off the primary avenue for democratic engagement in Hong Kong. She concluded by underscoring that over the past decade, the level of freedom in Hong Kong has seen a significant decline. Interestingly, the CCP not only suppresses dissent, but also censors its own loyal intellectuals and internet celebrities, such as Hu Xijing, Sima Nan, and Zhou Xiaoping. Their voices are used to pump up positivity among the public, and so are given more opportunities for expression. But if the CCP's top leadership see that they lose an appearance of neutrality, they are no longer useful to the party, and so they are also censored. Previously published content is deleted, and their new content struggles to pass censorship. Ultimately, the standards are controlled by the upper echelons of the CCP, and aside from them, no one knows what these standards are. These CCP-affiliated propagandists, who believe they are speaking according to the CCP's political correctness, eventually realize that they can never guess correctly. The CCP even censors its own previously published statements. Take, for instance, the book Prelude to History, edited by the Chinese historian Xiao Shu. It contains articles from newspapers like the New China Daily, led by Zhou Enlai, the first premier of the People's Republic of China, during the 1940s in areas controlled by the nationalists. It also includes pieces from the Liberation Daily in Yan'an, the central organ of the CCP. Some of these articles were penned by the first generation of CCP leaders like Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, and Liu Shaoqi, while others were written by renowned CCP writers. Despite the notable authors and historical significance of these articles, the book faced harsh criticism from the Central Propaganda Department and was banned. Shantou University Press, the publishing house responsible, was shut down, and its leadership was relocated from Shantou University. Additionally, public security forces from Beijing raided the Beijing Wansheng bookstore multiple times, seizing all copies of the book and destroying them. Why does this paradoxical phenomenon occur? Take a look at the outline of this book, and perhaps you'll understand. The book consists of 9 parts. 1. No democracy. Everything is just a facade. 2. Striving for democracy is the concern of all people in the country. 3. The blade of democracy. 4. Letting thoughts break free from the cage. 5. China needs genuine universal suffrage. 6. Schools should be bastions of democracy. 7. Inalienable human rights. 8. One-party dictatorship is a disaster everywhere. 9. Who makes China unstable? It's the authoritarian government. It's obvious that the CCP wouldn't want people to understand this. The content within was originally used by the CCP before it came to power to deceive Western countries such as the United States. At the time, this rhetoric worked, and the West stopped arms sales to the then nationalist government, allowing the CCP to gain the upper hand in the Civil War, ultimately succeeding in seizing power. The CCP obtained power through deception. Before coming to power in 1949, the CCP made many promises to the Chinese people. It promised to realize Sun Yat-sen's ideals of national rejuvenation, democracy, and people's livelihood. It echoes Lincoln's government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and Roosevelt's of freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. However, 75 years have passed, and the CCP has failed to deliver. Perhaps it never intended to. Ironically, by banning Prelude to History, the CCP only made this book more popular. As the author, Xiao Shu, mentioned in an article, dealing with the CCP's own historical documents, they are using the methods of fighting the enemy, showing how fearful the authorities are. However, their fear is justified. Not only do they have no way to refute the book, they have no way to contain its influence. Iron-fisted censorship not only doesn't work, but instead becomes the best advertisement for the book. Even today, the citation of the book remains high. As Lincoln once said, "You may fool all the people some of the time. You can even fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time." How the CCP acted during the 3 years of the pandemic, witnessed firsthand by 1.4 billion Chinese people, have awakened many to the true face of the regime. Although most Chinese people currently dare not speak, some are holding up a blank piece of paper in protest. They might pose a serious challenge to the CCP in the future. Young Chinese are no longer easily brainwashed.
I have no reason to make excuses for my lack of courage. I hope many people can think about this question. What is the purpose of our country? Is it for the happiness of the people? At least from the current point of view, I feel that many people have suffered a lot, including the Uyghur concentration camps, Hong Kong people, and Tibetans. Whenever I am needed, I will bravely stand up. Long live freedom, white paper revolution.
The accumulating dissatisfaction with the government is growing stronger, and Chinese citizens continue to mock and express their discontent online. The authorities' censorship efforts are increasingly appearing weak and ineffective. The government can only shut down comment sections and pretend not to see. This is because implementing such extensive censorship requires massive costs, and as the CCP loses clout, many local governments cannot pay their workers. A Chinese idiom goes, "eyes meeting on the road." It refers to travelers meeting on the road, daring not to speak to each other, but signaling to each other with their eyes. Even if the Chinese people can only make eye contact but cannot speak, they understand each other's plight.